Hello athletes, Travis here, back with another training talk, and today's discussion I'm going to be focused very specifically on people who have come into indoor rowing or possibly even on the water rowing, but primarily indoor rowing, kind of from a vector that did not have you intersecting any sort of professional coaching or advanced professional coaching, I would say, because there's certainly some coaching out there that's not the kind of top tier. And I'm speaking, when I'm talking about that coaching, I'm speaking very specifically toward coaches who are geared toward high performance rowing, probably on the water, that Orange Theory coaches or CrossFit coaches are not going to be able to really get the most out of you from a rowing sense in a technical way, just because that's not been their focus. All right, but there is a lot of great videos out there on YouTube, you know, from places like Decent Rowing or RM Training, you know, or Shane's Dark Horse Rowing, or even Training Toss. You know, there's a lot of good technical videos out there, but I want to talk to you about kind of how to look at yourself and what you're seeing on the monitor and decide kind of where you are in your development. All right. And the first thing for this is that we're going to be using your speed at kind of your base aerobic zone as kind of your evaluative tool here. All right, so this is UT2 training. I've talked about it a lot on the channel here. I'll link some videos both kind of in this pop-up here and down below if you want to check those out, assuming that you haven't already. But if you are effectively executing UT2, there's a range of splits that is appropriate for all athletes. All right, and if you fall outside of that range on the slower end, then it's not an indication of your fitness or your potential in the sport. It's simply more indication of, have you figured out how to apply power effectively on the indoor rowing machine. And so for me as a coach, especially when I'm working with athletes that are very new to the sport at the novice level, in those first couple months or maybe even longer if they're adults, just because the adults don't train with the same frequency as the youth when they enter the sport, there are certain thresholds of speed that I kind of expect for athletes. All right, and to kind of get to the crux of it, for a male athlete, you know, the typical range for male athlete in a UT2 steady state is going to be, you know, for kind of above average athlete in that mid 150s up to maybe high 2 teens. All right, and now once you start to get into kind of high performance in the elite level, especially with the heavyweight, you're going to kind of drift into those 140s, and kind of an elite heavyweight is probably going to be drifting or flirting with kind of the mid 140s for their UT2, but definitely under 150. And then, but at the high end, at that 218, there are no male athletes that should be pulling their UT2 steady state, you know, in the 220s or above. All right, with the possible exception of a prepubescent male middle school athlete that's just really short, really small, doesn't have a lot of musculature. But any post-pubescent male athlete should be falling in that range. And if you are an athlete, a male athlete that's not falling in that range, it's not an indication of your fitness or your potential in the sport. It's simply saying that you haven't learned how to apply your energy effectively. You know, in the same way that if a male was about to go and run on the streets, you're never going to find a male running at 20 minutes per mile. All right, there's just no males that are going to do that, and you're going to be really hard pressed to find a male that can't run faster than a 12-minute mile. Now, my professional experience is not in running, it's in rowing, so I can't tell you kind of where that threshold is of where all males, no matter what kind of fitness level, what shape you are, should be within. But I know for rowing that it doesn't matter, you know, how old you are, how short you are, whatever it may be, you should at least be able to pull, you know, let's say 218 and below. And again, if you're not pulling that, it's a sign that you haven't learned how to apply your fitness. All right, so I'm saying a very out of shape individual that's not suffering from any kind of disabilities or is not kind of obese and is restricted in kind of their range of motion. And I would say even if you're, you know, somewhat restricted in your range of motion, then you should be able to pull under that 218. Maybe if you literally can't sit forward, you know, because you've got such a big gut, then that's going to kind of slow you beyond the gauge. But we're assuming that a person, who, even if you're slightly overweight, then as long as you can sit in a forward body angle, while you're driving with the legs, you should be able to get that 218 or below. All right, and for those people that are in kind of that range for the males, I would say you're talking about much older athletes probably in their 70s and above, or extremely young athletes, kind of middle school athletes, prepubescent males, or maybe males that are just kind of entering that kind of puberty and haven't kind of fully, adapted to their bodies yet. All right, those are the male athletes that I would expect kind of in that range. And then as they develop and mature, then they're going to get a little bit closer to that 155, kind of max for kind of a non-high performance athlete, and then even farther if you're a high performance athlete. So if you're looking at that as the range, then you can look at that then as well and say, well, the average male, relatively fit, relatively healthy male, should be somewhere in that kind of 2 minutes, maybe to 2:05 range for their UT2 splits. All right, and so if you look at yourself and you look at yourself outside the context of rowing and say, I'm a fit athlete, and relatively healthy, got relatively normal body proportions or even above average body proportions, if you're tall or you got long limbs, and if I'm not in that range, then it's probably just a matter of fitness, but it's more likely a matter of technique, all right, that you're not able to kind of leverage your work effectively. And I'm not going to go into the technique that's required for this video, because that's not the point of this video. This video is really just to kind of give people an idea of where they could expect themselves to be once they're rowing at a high technical level, or even above average technical level, and a reasonable amount of fitness. All right, and so kind of looking back at my own history, in training, and granted, I've been very successful in championships at the pre-elite level. I've won club nationals, I've won Canadian Henley. I've definitely not reached the elite level because there's a huge gap there between that pre-elite, elite, but certainly kind of been, certainly above average. But even for me, when I was just getting into the sport, I was a healthy guy with fairly poor technique because I had just gotten into the sport, and I was 148 pounds at the time, 5'8", still could drop 205, 206, for UT2 steady states. All right, and then and maybe if I was out of shape and I wasn't in season, I was just getting back into it, you're looking at maybe 210, 212 for that athlete. All right, so that's like after taking like a month or two off for the winter, because I used to take those months off in the winter and not train through. So that's even kind of a normal, fairly short athlete, kind of compared to kind of the average rower, and what I expected coming in both out of shape and then later when I was in shape. And when I was at peak shape, it was more like 157, 158. So if you are an athlete and you're sitting there and you're saying, well, I'm 40 years old, I'm picking up the sport, I'm carrying about 30, 40 extra pounds, and I've been doing this for a month or two, what should I expect for my UT2? And I would say you probably should be expecting yourself, if you're rowing well with good technique, to be pulling somewhere, in the 206 to 210 range. And then, as your technique improves, you can kind of move beyond that. And so if you're falling outside of that range, if you're looking at yourself and you're like, okay, well, if, 218 is, 70 plus years old, and then, or it's also someone very young, which I don't think there's any 10-year-olds, 12 or 13-year-olds watching these videos. If that's the slow end, and I look at myself in that population, I just think objectively, where should I be, between, kind of the most fit, of my peers and the least fit, in my peers, and then say, okay, well, I'm about average, so boom, you're right at that kind of 208 spot. Maybe I should be thinking about pulling 208. And if I'm not pulling 208, don't think about working harder, think about working more efficiently. All right, and so you should at least be able to hold that comfortably, without going anaerobic for 10, 15 minutes at that split, even if you're not in shape, if you're just going out there. Just like, any normal person who's not used to running should be able to go out and run for 10, 15 minutes, albeit very slowly, but you should be able to complete that. Same thing with rowing. All right, and so that's kind of the ranges for male athletes. For female athletes, the kind of the principles are the same, but obviously the range is different. All right, so for the typical kind of above average female athletes, I would say, hitting somewhere in the between the maybe 208 to 212 range. All right, and then an elite athlete, elite female athlete at the top end, you're going to be kind of scooting it down under the 2-minute range, maybe 157 plus or minus a little bit. All right, and even a high performance junior athlete is going to be flirting under 205, for those steady states. But the top end of that, is somewhere around probably about a 236, 238 range. And so going back again, so if you're a female athlete, and you're pulling 240 something, 250 something, definitely if you're pulling 3 minutes something, it's not because you're not in shape. It's because you haven't learned how to leverage your work efficiently. All right. And if you can think, a good analogy for this is if you think about, you have a big wrench and you have a nut that's stuck, and you're trying to use that wrench to loosen up that nut. All right. A big heavy guy is going to be able to get there and just use their muscles and loosen it up really easy. Someone who's less strong, all right, can at the very least kind of get onto that and hang their body weight onto it. All right. No muscular required. If you're a 130-pound female, then you can just get on that and literally just hang there, and you've got 130 pounds of work that you can kind of be putting into that wrench. All right, that's a given. You don't have to be fit, you don't have to know how to pull wrenches, you still have that weight. All right, and essentially when you have learned how to row effectively with good technique, you are leveraging that body weight. All right, and so it's essentially the ability to leverage that body weight regardless of your fitness that's going to bring you into that top end range that I'm talking about here. All right, so any male, all right, a very small male or a very old male, their weight and being able to leverage their weight with good technique is going to get them under a 218. And then how fit they are beyond that is going to determine how much beyond that 218 that they're going to be. Same thing with the female. Female, regardless of your age, whatnot, a female with good technique should be able to get that split under those high 230s, just by virtue of the ability to leverage their body weight effectively on that erg handle. All right, and then everything else is a matter of force production and fitness. All right, and that's it. And same thing there, with the female athletes. If you are, 40-something female, you're coming into rowing the first time, you picked up a C2 during the pandemic or hydro or whatnot, and you're learning how to row, then you look at yourself and you say, all right, well, the slowest, a 70-year-old female athlete with good technique and just mediocre fitness should be pulling, a 238, and a top end, kind of non-elite athlete can be pulling like a 212. Then where should I be in that? All right, probably around the middle, probably around, mid to low 220s. For that split, and that's where I can kind of find myself settling. All right, and so the next step, after you kind of figure out where you are, one, if you're outside of those ranges, then don't fret. That should be encouraging, because it's going to say you're in a position where you can get a lot of speed benefits simply by working on your technique, by watching these videos by all these great channels out there. I'll name them again: Decent Rowing, Aerobic Training, Dark Horse Rowing, Training Tall. Those are all great channels with great insights into technique for rowing. So check out those channels, kind of listen to what they're saying, apply it. You're in a position where you can pick up a lot of speed, just by learning how to use your body weight effectively in the rowing stroke. All right, and then once you get within that range, then it's fitness. All right, then it's fitness, is going to kind of push you in, and not only fitness though, you're always going to kind of improve that technique. And I chuckle when kind of people post and say, hey, I think I've got pretty good technique and this is my split. In the sport, I would say 95% of people in the sport have at least one or two significant issues with their technique where they could pick up a noticeable amount of speed, and probably 70% of people in the sport have glaring, ingrained technical issues that could get them a lot of speed. All right, especially people who have come to the sport and you've only been watching those videos, because those videos can only go so far, because you still ultimately got to coach yourself, and troubleshoot yourself. But if you come in, you come in through, teaching yourself, or you've come in through a CrossFit vector or Orange Theory vector, or even kind of, a local team vector where the coaches are either amateurs or volunteers, or they're just not veteran coaches, then chances are you have some technical issues, all right? And that can get you a lot of speed. And so the final thoughts for this is that, granted, most of the people who are, experienced rowers have probably kind of tuned out for now because they realized this video wasn't focused on them. But the reality is that never stop, thinking about technique. For me, having had the success that I have on the erg, there's not a single session that I sit down and I don't focus very specifically on improving some aspect of my technique. All right, and it's the same thing with Olympic athletes, that are out there training on the water, in the boat. Every session, none of them are like, well, my technique is fine, I'm just going to focus on getting a good hard session, a good hard workout. No, every time they're out there, they're focusing on improving some element of their efficiency through an improvement in technique. All right, and so if you want to improve yourself as a rower, and most importantly, in my opinion, certainly as a recreational rower, is to insulate yourself from the potential of injury, then your focus on technique is paramount. All right, if you're doing the work, the fitness will take care of itself. But you can do the work and not get better technically. All right, that requires a decision, that requires a focus. All right, so that's it, that's my video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I am going to be looking at adding some options this winter through GTS Rowing for some kind of digital technical coaching and training sessions, so kind of stay tuned on that. If you're not aware of GTS Rowing, that's kind of a way that I can kind of connect with athletes that are interested in some one-on-one coaching, or they're just interested in kind of talking one-on-one, asking some questions to troubleshoot. There's consulting options, there's kind of a long-term remote coaching relationship option, from a month-to-month basis that you got to get involved there. And I'm looking to kind of add a kind of structure, just like part of a team, a winter team training program that people can kind of sign up in and hop along. So if you're interested in that, let me know in the comments below, or shoot me a message either by email or on Instagram at GTS Rowing. But yeah, definitely keep an eye out and look forward to that. But in the meantime, good luck with the training. I hope this helps you kind of get a little sense of kind of where you fall in your development and where you can kind of improve from there. And definitely check out the other videos on the channel if you want more talks like this. Thanks everyone. This is Travis. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.